Why does the rotten establishment keep winning, even though we all see and smell the decaying flesh? To understand this, we need to understand how incredibly immoral and cynical are the tactics deployed in a culture war. Understanding this doctrine is crucial if we are to successfully navigate through the dangers of modernity, but beware, the final picture is quite dark. Especially when we are talking about an asymmetrical kind of conflict, where one of the sides is the old corrupt establishment, stomping out anyone who dares to suggest that there has to be a better way of doing things. For establishment, victory is not only a question of profit or philosophical conviction, it is also a question of profound, decadent self-interest, a cancerous clinging to undeserved life. Any kind of loss would mean showing just how malignant this older paradigm has become. The crooked establishment can and will use a whole plethora of dirty tricks to sway the human spirit and therefore public opinion to its side. These are ancient tactics, but our modern practical understanding makes them incredibly more evolved and dangerous through weaponization of psychology, sociology, and essentially ideological marketing. For those who carefully watch the establishment, its communication and behavior, it is easy to see the despicable plastic corporate falsehood, but that doesn't matter. Careful, cynical, mistrusting observers were never relevant targets for weaponized social sciences on the battlefield of mass society. So, within the upcoming show, we shall look into these dirty tactics. To achieve this, I will build a completely fictitious example of a country named the Most Serene Republic of Samvaria, where a new, serious social conflict is brewing. It concerns whether consumption of carrots should or should not be part of societal ethos, and because the establishment simply cannot lose even on this petty issue, it will blow this seemingly simple question out of proportion. Welcome to Magne Mirare. Generally, culture war occurs when two mutually exclusive ethoses are fighting over the right to steer the culture of a society. Culture is one of two most important factors upstream from politics, with the other being technology. Essentially, one who changes how culture works can change the spirit of the whole civilization and therefore the future of humanity itself. This is a truly gargantuan event in which actions of every individual have the potential to echo through centuries, even millennia. In the modern world dominated by GDP-obsessed politics, it became normal to simplistically follow the flow of money as the sole constituent of any motivation and turmoil, but the truth is as always more complicated than the petty secular rationality can grasp. A better approach would be one considering a multitude of both material and immaterial factors, which may very well be influenced by money, but not exclusively. These factors are quite nicely described by Maslow's pyramid of needs. People strive to fulfill different levels of these needs, and presumably, this should lead a healthy individual to a sense of happiness and purpose. Now, money is of course a very useful tool for achieving them, but it is not the only one. First, they become less and less useful as you move to upper layers of the pyramid. But second, they can pretty harshly falter, even when considering the most basic needs. It doesn't matter if you have all the money in the world, if there is literally no food or no viable mate. Different groups in our complicated society need to employ different strategies to fulfill those needs, and of course, different societal principles, such as specific ethics, can be both beneficial or detrimental for these strategies. I would even say it is practically impossible for any principle to be universally beneficial. There will always be damage to some other group. The more gains or damage a societal principle can cause, the bigger is the inevitable conflict. The most serious situation occurs when adoption of a new principle is necessary, but any single choice will absolutely decimate the opposing side. Let us now look at the situation of the Most Serene Republic of Samvaria. We can see this glorious country as a major regional power. This industrial nation has a long and mythological history, but its current republican form is the result of unification efforts during the age of industrialization some 120 years ago. Today's capital city, Taxington, was back then a prosperous local merchant republic with trade posts around the whole region. Their investments and shrewd diplomacy permitted them to strategically urbanize different local states, and finally, through careful ideological marketing, they managed to spread the idea of pan-national integration into one economic powerhouse. Resulting society is built upon concentration of wealth and power into the hands of few most loyal urban areas, while the opposition is built either from secondary local areas, which are seen as disgraced, and from rural agricultural populations. Now, knowing these interest groups, we can try to map the battlefield of society on which a particular conflict of the larger cultural war will be fought. Culture war itself is composed of smaller specific battles, which are waged over singular issues. It might seem that the sides of these smaller issues might be the same as the ones of the overarching conflict, but that is not the case. Specific issues can mobilize different parts of society, depending on how that issue influences their own survival strategies or their ethical view of the world. Some battles may be also so divisive and complicated that people find themselves cooperating with yesterday's enemies. Each battle can profoundly change the landscape of large coalitions of a culture war. To represent a singular battle fought over a singular issue, it is quite useful to view it as a bell curve. Here we have a distribution of loyalty to a cause. The vast swath in the middle represents an almost undecided, uninterested population. These are people who have absolutely no horse in the race, but they are also, consequently, the most precious resource over which the battle is fought. For both sides, it is absolutely critical to win these people over. This also goes back to my point that this war was never about those who carefully observe society with the goal of actually understanding it. It is first and foremost about the most numerous and profoundly uninterested group of normies. On the outermost extremes, we have the ideological elites. These are the ones who are leaders of the cause. They are the most influential and often wealthy constituents of the battle. Note that these are people who stand to gain or lose the most, often in very cynical and materialistic terms. They are the Machiavellian orchestrators. Rarely they are the ones who actually fight. That would be the ideological soldiers. The soldiers are the ones actually willing to give their spirit, mind, and sometimes their bodies for the cause. Be it the members of aligned institutions like college teachers, members of political organizations, or finally just devout sympathizers. All of these are different ranking soldiers whose task is to put the will of their side into motion. In the example of Samveria, our two sides are thus. On one side, we have the expansionist establishment, which is trying to implement a strong bureaucratic government. The ranks of their elites are filled by extremely successful monopolistic businessmen, long-term political dynasties, and high-ranking unelected bureaucratic officials. Success of these people is built upon an unopposed imperialistic expansion. They are supported by all those different government-paid institutions like the National College of Taxington, the High Sea Shipping Company, and the puppet government from their dependent dominion of Uprivera. The larger societal support comes from the urbanized middle class, which embrace the new pan-nationalistic feel of Samverian identity. On the other side, the opposition would be represented by a coalition of disenfranchised voices. Often, these would be regional agricultural landowners or growing secondary industrialists from locations with strong cultural and ethnic identities which survived the Samverian unification. These are, of course, supported by growing regional movements, rural folks, and lower-class trade unions, which are trying to steer the winds of modernization in favor of the laborers and lower classes. Both of these sides have the same goal. They want to push with all their social might into the ranks of unaligned normies and eliminate neutrality. Once the neutral resource has been divided as much as possible, they can start to push against each other, trying to wear the other side down enough to concede the issue. This is essentially movement of the Overton Window, which is something I will talk about in later chapters in more details. This practically means there are three ultimate goals. First, mobilizing the strength of allied soldiers. Second, demoralizing rival soldiers. And finally, third, discrediting or even criminalizing rival elites. Now we can move on to a specific cultural battle. Some 8 years ago, the Sumerian army engaged in a military intervention in western parts of the sea, where they triumphed and subsequently secured two new treaty ports of Delphren and Islandor, as well as the dominion of Coastward. The opposition voices are criticizing the futility and cost of this war as something unacceptable. General population also does not understand in what ways is this bloody expansion even useful. Don't worry, the establishment has a plan. The dominion of Coastward has particularly different soil and climate from the old lands, and is, therefore, excellent for mass-producing carrots. Expansion of these carrot farms would not only be very profitable, but would also provide a great opportunity for money laundering. And finally, if these endeavors are successful, they could even topple and utterly destroy the opposition of landowners and local farmers from rebellious regions. However, for this to happen, people in the homelands need to actually buy carrots. So a large-scale campaign, Got Carrots, is about to sweep through the whole nation of Samvaria. The battle begins once the theme enters wider society, once it is generally believed to be a question that everyone should talk about and have opinion on. In our specific case, suddenly carrots are everywhere in the news. Politicians are talking about new carrot tariffs and their incredible benefits for the economy. Different news outlets are inviting nutritionists to talk about the superfood that is a carrot and how it rids you of all toxins and preserves your eyesight. The generic Friday evening talk show guy is dancing dressed as a carrot like the clown he is. A popular fashion designer rolled out a new collection in the orange color. And finally, adult performances suddenly involve a lot more carrots than usual. Carrots are all the rage. At this moment, of course, the opposition is trying to raise their voice. They are trying to talk about the benefits of balanced nutrition, as well as about the dangers that agricultural import poses for local farmers. Local nationalistic voices dare to talk about the fact that carrot is not a traditional part of the diet and is foreign to local cuisine. This all can sound somewhat reasonable, which is something the establishment does not want. Its opening strategy needs to reframe the whole question in such a way that any opposition is seen as backward, uninformed, and idiotic. The tactic used here can be called creation of false dichotomy. Until now, the battle was waged between pro-carrot and anti-carrot voices. It was either yes or no. This is too simple of a dichotomy, because it permits the opposition to organize as opposition. And therefore, it is too comprehensible and sensible for the uninterested normie. He simply needs to focus on yes or no, and we don't want that. A new dichotomy needs to be created, one which confuses everyone and muddies the waters. So, instead of addressing the general concerns raised around the question of carrots, the establishment focuses solely on one specifically selected group: the cabbage farmers from eastern regions. When talking about the issue, they dismiss any opposition as the voices of cabbage lobby. The only people they are even addressing are the large-scale cabbage landowner oligarchs. For example, in political debate, the only people passionately discussing this issue are these two sides. Immediately, the whole conflict and underlying dichotomy were subverted. It is not a question of yes or no for the carrots. It is a question of either carrots or cabbages. A false dichotomy. This greatly demoralizes the opposing voices. For many people, cabbage magnates are unpopular due to them being oligarchic landowners. They also come from a specific region with specific ethnicity, so it all seems as one cultural group trying to achieve new cultural hegemony over all others. This is suddenly a petty fight of two untouchable and very wealthy groups over power. Nothing remains of the original message, and different local farmers, or the trade unions, are not willing to participate because it would mean supporting competition either way. And for normal people, proclaiming their dislike for carrots automatically makes them sound like some French maniac supporting some weird ultranationalistic cabbage regions in the East. Now that the opposition was thoroughly demoralized and fractured by this one simple trick, it is time to upgrade this conflict into a larger cultural battle over a bigger ethical principle. Of course, at this moment it could simply suffice to let the passion simmer down and simply achieve a mild agricultural victory. But this would still keep in existence all those opposing voices who were simply against carrots. And the voices would heal their wounds and keep their frustrations for the next battle. Again, the establishment does not want this. Its victory needs to be thorough and on large cultural scale. Why stop now when they are on a winning streak? Instead, it is time to take this advantage into the next level and create a mythological narrative around the issue. One which will greatly help to mobilize aligned people and cement their unity in the continual cultural conflict. Mythological narrative is essentially a series of stories which can be deeply ingrained into the collective consciousness of the whole nation. The goal here is to make carrots into something inseparable from Samverian identity. To move this question from realm of rational nutrition and tariff debates into the realm of flags, symbols, loyalty, virtues, and all that while the Samverian anthem plays throughout the lands. This specifically means implanting carrots into an already existing framework of values and making them seem as structural part of those values, or their natural and healthy evolution. Ideally, anyone criticizing carrots becomes, in the eyes of uninterested normies, someone who criticizes their whole identity and everything they hold as sacred. It then creates this idea of the other. If I am morally good, which is something people always want to presume, then there is no other possibility than the other one being bad. Here, the path is already half cleared, because the national flag of Samveria naturally contains orange color. This is a historical reference to the times of the Great Merchant Republic of Taxington, which was the largest importer of mineral pigment called realgar. This very pricey colorant was a symbol of status in the whole region. Imports of carrots can therefore be dressed as a sort of symbolic continuation of this old mercantile tradition. It was the shrewd economical brilliance of Taxingtonian traders which created this whole prosperous nation. This entrepreneurial spirit is what lies in the core of every single proud Samverian. This is what makes them so great. But the Samverians are not only great businessmen, they are, of course, incredibly caring and pro-social. Therefore, carrots are made into an integral part of social security. They become a staple product for food banks, feeding the poor, the old, and the feeble. Placated trade unions are always supportive of any redistributionist efforts, overlooking the fact that this support is creating a new, powerful monopoly. This helps to sway the most disenfranchised voices. Suddenly, revolutionary socialists and fringe radical groups are in support of big government thanks to a very simple cynical move. In this manner, the establishment is happy because it can continue to build its economical and bureaucratic hegemony, while the most dangerous, radical and subversive groups are clapping and are prepared to use violence in support of this social theater. For a normal person, expressing even a trivial distaste for carrots means becoming a social pariah. The middle class will shun you because you are attacking the basic mercantile values that created this great nation, while the fringe socialists, with their mob mentality, will kindly storm your house or your business because you are the enemy of social welfare. If you don't eat carrots, you want to kill poor people and everyone's grandmother. At this moment, it is time to secure the absolute obedience of uninterested normies. They may be too scared to talk, but there are still some who find this whole carrot thing weird, and therefore it is a possible source of their radicalization. Carrots need to be normalized. Here comes into play the Overton Window, also known as the window of discourse. It essentially represents the range of opinions which are seen as acceptable for public debate. You can see here a visualization of this gradient. The window helps us define what is popular policy, what is an acceptable opinion, and what is a social taboo. What the establishment does is that, essentially, it is using different means to normalize what they want and stigmatize the opposition. Through these forces, it achieves movement of the window and therefore it acquires a mandate to change policy. One smart move was to supplant a whole half of the discourse by confusion around cabbages. The other was, of course, the mythologization of the issue through ties to national identity and ethos. These moves by themselves help to shift the window. Now it is time to exert even more force. To normalize an issue, it simply suffices for normal people to be encountering it in the public. For this reason, the establishment starts to finance public carrot pride marches. These are, at first glance, wholesome events where people meet in the streets and they can buy a plethora of carrot products like pies in nice family-run stalls. Together, they sing and they have few key speakers talking about the benefits of carrots, etc. The crucial thing here is that a random uninterested passerby is subconsciously normalizing the presence of carrots in his life. He does not need to participate, he does not need to spend time there, and he certainly does not need to buy a piece of pie. The only important thing is that he is getting used to carrots being present. And after a few successful events, the establishment can employ even stronger force. For this one special event, it decides that the Overton Window has shifted enough that the position, which were considered unimaginable, now can enter public view. Suddenly, few key speakers are true radicals. Some of them talk about the idea of carrots being proclaimed as national vegetables. Others may be proposing a carrot-only diet. And one key speaker is presenting to the oh-so-tolerant society the struggles of carrot sexuals. Nothing has really changed so profoundly with the crowd of normal attenders. They are still the same people who like pies. But the few key speakers, just few specific people, are changing a whole ethos of the event. And now, when the random passerby arrives again, he is bombarded with speeches about official carrot partnerships. And this guy is not discerning between the radical speakers and the moderate crowd. For him, this event is one whole package, normalizing the extreme radical opinions in his subconscious. Remember, this thing does not need to make coherent sense. The whole philosophy does not need to be complete or void of inner discrepancies. You as a thinker do not matter. Only the normal guy undergoing the process of subconscious normalization does. Previously introduced tactics proved to be incredibly effective and achieved two important goals. They mobilized the strength of allied soldiers and demoralized rival soldiers. There is one last goal to be achieved for a complete victory. The establishment needs to criminalize and absolutely crush remaining rival elites. To do this, they need pretense strong enough to warrant a legal action. For this, it is necessary to sow fear into the heart of the nation. Significant assistance will come from radicals, revolutionary socialists, psychologically unstable thugs, and paramilitary splinter groups from trade unions. With the government support, these groups are informed about events and protests organized by the remaining anti-carrot voices. The goal here is to cause civil unrest and conflicts between both sides. Police are instructed not to intervene, but few undercover officials are implanted into anti-carrot marches as agents provocateurs who are to stir the pot. Soon, violent clashes are happening everywhere around the country. But the media are focusing on those demonic anti-carrot extremists, whose aim is nothing but full-blown revolution, civil war, and eventually dissolution of the whole Sumerian Republic. Legal encroachments and police raids on anti-carrot's headquarters are happening regularly, but the official response is never strong enough to stop the whole movement. It is key to keep the passions brewing, because what we want here is for the anti-carrot movement to throw an actual tantrum by themselves. Humiliation, humiliation, and humiliation. Eventually, anti-carrotists are pushed into desperation. They believe that there is no other way out of the mess than actual violent outbursts, which will be either forced upon them through continuing oppression, or it will be achieved through a false flag incident. In any case, it will happen. The anti-carrotists, however just in their original goals, will eventually have to transform in real revolutionary force. They are not given any other option. Finally, during a large protest, the crowd storms warehouses of carrot shipping companies. They start to destroy all the merchandise, throwing it into the blue waters of the harbor. During all of that, a rumor about lynched warehouse manager starts to spread out throughout the nation's media. Large-scale police response ensues. The protesters are locked and to be forgotten for years in solitary confinements before the kangaroo courts actually even happen. All main leaders' homes are raided and they are publicly arrested with their families. Soon, legal documents, real or forged, about financing are discovered, tying the whole operation both to cabbage magnates and to many other elites like known intellectuals or inconvenient independent industrialists. All of them are imprisoned and are to be judged in a massive political trial. While all of this is happening very publicly, it is time to clear our own ranks. Revolutionary socialists and paramilitary trade unions were incredibly useful but cannot remain functioning. Their political oppression and destruction is, however, very quiet. This is cleaning of the house, not exemplary propaganda. Now, one could think that such massive political turmoil could worsen the situation, that it could give the power of martyrdom to rivaling cultural soldiers. And that is true. If this is to become a done deal, so to speak, one last move is needed. The victory needs to be cemented through diversion of attention. New societal theme, completely unrelated to the previous one, needs to be established. Thankfully, by pure chance, that's precisely what happens. On the far island of Whalin, a local radical group attacked the Samwarian embassy, detonating a bomb and killing many good Samwarian diplomats as well as civilians. All normies turned their attention to the human tragedy, rallying around the Samwarian flag and holding deep moments of silence and contemplation. Soon, it is to be discovered that the radical group has ties to the Whalinian government, and therefore this is an act of war. Emotional normies are shedding tears and singing nationalistic songs in the harbor, watching the brave soldiers embarking on a military expedition. A little girl asks her daddy why the old warehouse in the harbor is burned. He does not know.